Freedom, man. That's what it's all about. You've got to groove on freedom, like the good book says.
Welcome. You are listening to What on Earth is Happening. This show will discuss the topics of human consciousness, mind control, natural law, the occult, and all issues that affect the freedom of the people of Earth. What on Earth is Happening will endeavor to shine light upon the darkness of our world and to offer empowering solutions to the problems we face as humanity approaches its critical moment of choice. And now, here is your host, Mark Passio.
Freedom for the people, humanity and all mankind. Liberate your soul and mind. It's waiting for you all to find.
Welcome one and all. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on Republic Broadcasting. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. The network's website, republicbroadcasting.org. Today is Saturday, March 29th, 2014, and this show is live every Saturday evening from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. Eastern Time. That's 9 p.m. to midnight Central. We have a great show lined up for you here tonight. I'm going to be getting into the occult season of sacrifice, a period of time which listeners really need to know about and understand that we have already entered into during the course of this year. I am also going to be breaking down the characteristics of psychopaths and basically doing a review of what psychopathy really is and the characteristics that psychopaths embody. But then we're going to shift gears and start to cover new ground in this show, What on Earth is Happening. We are going to talk about the possible origins of psychopathy as a lead-in, as an intro to future material, which we are going to ease into a little bit because it's going to be probably the heaviest and most controversial material that I have probably covered since I've started broadcasting. So that's coming up on this edition of What on Earth is Happening. Let me give the call-in number right at the top of the show so people can call in and get in the queue. Hopefully I'll have some time to take calls throughout the show tonight. Definitely want to get into calls later in the show, but as things progress, maybe we'll take calls in every hour of the show. So the call-in number to join us here on What on Earth is Happening, 1-800-313-9443. Once again, the call-in number to join us, 800-313-9443. I have several event announcements and announcements about what I've been doing, so just please bear with me as I go through some of these, and then we'll get into the material for tonight. I spoke last weekend in Asheville, North Carolina. I gave an all-day seminar on March 22nd, the official beginning of the season of sacrifice. That's the day that this 40-day time period starts each year. And it was a huge success. I have to say, I was absolutely thrilled with how everything went in Asheville. It was a packed house, a beautiful venue at the Lexington Avenue Brewery. And I want to thank Carolyn Guillaume for hosting the event. She did a phenomenal job from beginning to end with all the preparations for this entire event. Like I said, it was a packed house, and the people, the quality of people who turned out for this event, I can't say enough about. There were potential teachers of natural law and potential teachers of occulted knowledge in attendance at the Asheville seminar. I could tell. We hung out afterward and talked for hours. I stayed at the Lexington Avenue Brewery until about midnight on Saturday after the presentation because the energy was running so high that I just didn't really want it to end. And I think a lot of people got great value from this seminar. I think it really hit home with a lot of folks who attended, and I think people will be sharing this information with others as a result. So that's the news on the Asheville seminar. It was marred only by one small mishap, and I posted that on my webpage, and it's actually been taken care of. So what happened was the audio recording was lost, and I thought I wasn't going to be able to make a video presentation because I have a wireless lapel microphone system that I usually use to record my audio, the audio component of my lectures or seminars. And what happened was I patched that wireless receiver through to a laptop computer on which I was recording the audio. And there was no sound engineer on duty. It was just me. I was like wearing that hat as well as speaking on this particular day. That's kind of a mistake on my part. I really should have someone professionally at the event that is going to do the recording every time. But in this case, I figured I had it covered because I had a good wireless lapel mic system and I had a good laptop. Unfortunately, about 20 to 25 minutes into the morning session of the seminar, the software that I used to record the seminar crashed. The operating system didn't crash, but the actual recording software crashed on me. And around lunchtime, I recognized that we had lost all the audio for the whole morning session. So I didn't even really bother to record the afternoon session because I figured, well, even if I record just that, I'm not going to have anything from the morning session, so I'm not really going to be able to make a full video, so what's the point? I posted word on my website afterward that if anybody should have announced it, and I, in going back into and getting my head together for the second part of the presentation, I neglected to mention it on the microphone on stage that I needed audio recording from someone in the crowd to make a video of the presentation afterward. So I posted that on my website and on my Facebook page, and finally someone did get in touch with me, so that is resolved. Steve Mercer from Florida steps forward to save the day with a good audio recording that he made in person right in front of the stage up in the front row. It's a quality recording. It's going to be sufficient to put out a video with this incarnation of this presentation, New Age BS and the suppression of the sacred masculine revisited. So over the next couple of weeks I will probably start working on that video editing process and hopefully get a video out within a month tops. So special thanks to Steve Mercer for saving the day with an independent audio recording. And that's why I tell people, anytime I'm speaking, you want to record, break out a video camera, break out an audio camera, and record away. This information is not copywritten by me. It's not, doesn't belong to me. This is information that is the birthright of all intelligent beings everywhere, and it is, the human birthright, and it's our responsibility to get this information out there in as widely available of a way and in as freely a way as possible. So that's my policy on anybody recording my material. A couple of interviews that I did, and some interviews that are coming up. I was interviewed by Kevin Tilsner on Zeitgeist Philadelphia Radio, the Zeitgeist movement here in Philadelphia, on March 27th. And the main topic of discussion was natural law within a resource-based, or what is known as a gift economy. And Kevin and I discussed not only that, but we discussed the true difference between real property versus erroneous claims of property and what people believe are their rights to own, everything and take it all, and that was really stressed during the conversation, what's real property versus what are bogus claims to property. So you could check that out. That is now posted on the What on Earth is Happening website in the news section. I was also interviewed, earlier today, a pre-recorded interview by Jeff Brady from WBAI. That's 99.5 FM. I believe that's out of Long Island, New York. And that will be broken into two live shows. They will both air on Mondays. First, March 31st at 10 p.m. Eastern on WBAI, and then on April 7th at 10 p.m. Eastern, WBAI Network, 99.5 FM, New York. And you could check out Jeff's website at NewYorkSkywatch.com. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be right back after these words.
Oh, silver darling. We don't need no education. We don't need no thought control.
We don't need no mind control, ladies and gentlemen. We need to get out. Get out of the mass mind manipulation that is propagated everywhere on this planet. I have a couple more quick event announcements before we get into the material for today's show. Sunday, March 30th, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Actually, that's tomorrow. I will be interviewed. It will be a part 2 interview on Starborn Support Radio. Great group of people at Starborn Support, hosted mainly by Michael Melton and Chris Augustine, guys who have been involved in the UFO community forever in the Philadelphia area, and like they're the leaders of, promoting awareness of topics such as this, certainly in this vicinity of the country. So I'm really thrilled to be going back on there, and we're going to continue our discussion of the dark side of the abduction phenomenon and really how we're all under a form of abduction here on the Earth. So part 2 of my interview on Starborn Support coming up tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. You can check that out at blogtalkradio.com/Starborn Support. Wednesday, April 2nd. That's this Wednesday coming up, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. I'll be on the radio show called Standing in Honor with Will Lehman. Will be interviewing me for 2 hours, and you can check that out at WeBookYourShow.com. WeBookYourShow.com. Standing in Honor is the link you want to go to with Will Lehman. I believe he podcasts through live stream, if I'm not mistaken, so you could check that out there Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. I'll be on Full Spectrum Radio out of Denver, Colorado on April 5th. I believe that's next Saturday. So I'll be doing 2 shows that day. This show during the day from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern, and then I'll be doing my show, of course, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Full Spectrum is available on KZKO Radio. That's KZKORadio.com. So lots of interviews lined up for the whole month of April. It's going to be a real busy month for me. Another great event announcement that I have is the Truth, Freedom, Prosperity documentary screening night is back in the Philadelphia area. We had to stop doing this because we lost access to our venue. We were hosting these great free documentary screening and discussion evenings at a Scene Market in Philadelphia. Unfortunately, a Scene got sold to new ownership, and the new owner wants nothing to do with the education of the people of the world. He's clearly all about nothing but the fake one eye as his god. So, unfortunately, with money being a lot of people's gods, we had to take up a search for a new venue. So, a Scene was out because of that reason, and now we have finally located a new venue. So the last one we did live was was back in November. The next one that's going to come up the first one at the new venue, which is Guerin Recreation Center. And let me tell you something, this place is great. In the middle of South Philadelphia, and it has a free parking lot for people who attend the recreation center. So anybody coming out to this, not only is it at a great new venue, in which case the people want us there and are really actively involved in wanting to spread information out to the people to help them become more informed. Not only is that the spirit in which this new venue is accepting us, but there is free parking at the venue, and you don't even have to worry about parking on the street or riding around looking for a parking spot. There's a huge parking lot that is free for people who attend the recreation center. Guerin Recreation Center is at 16th and Jackson Streets in Philadelphia. The exact address is 1600 Jackson Street. And the meetup will now take place on the third Thursday of every month here in Philadelphia. So for people in the Philadelphia area, every third Thursday of the month Guerin Recreation Center, 16th and Jackson Streets. The first meetup for the free documentary screening and discussion night will be Thursday, April 17th, 2014 at 7 o'clock p.m. We'll be going each third Thursday from about 7 p.m. to maybe about 9:30, something like that. And it's just, I'm really excited about the new venue. The first documentary film we're going to show on April 17th it's actually a repeat. We've shown this one before, but we feel that it's so important that more people need to see it, and we figured at a new venue where new people are going to be coming out, we really want them to see this film. It's called I Am Fishhead. A very strange name for a film, but there's a real reason behind that name. I'll read a brief description of this film we're going to show on April 17th here in Philadelphia. The film is called, again, I Am Fishhead. It is a well-known fact that our society is structured like a pyramid. The very few people at the top create the conditions for the majority below. Who are these people at the top? Can we blame them for all of the problems our society faces today? Guided by the old adage that a fish rots from the head, the filmmakers have set out to follow that fishy odor. And they found out that it is that people at the top those people at the top who are more likely to be psychopaths than the rest of us. And this is going to be a topic we're going to talk about a lot tonight on the show. Who or what is a psychopath? Unlike Hollywood's stereotypical image of a psychopath, psychopaths are not always bloodthirsty monsters from slasher movies, and serial killers. Actually, that nice old lady who chatted you up on the subway this morning could be a psychopath. So could your elementary school teacher, or your grinning boss, or even your so-called loving boyfriend. The medical definition of psychopathy is very simple. A psychopath is a person who lacks empathy and lacks conscience. The qualities which guide human beings when we make a free will decision between good and evil, between moral behavior or immoral behavior. Most of us, however, are conditioned to do good things with our lives, but psychopaths are absolutely not. Their impact on society is staggering, yet altogether, psychopaths barely make up 1% of the population, and if I had to venture a guess, it's far less than that. The primary psychopathic type is far less than 1%. Through interviews with renowned psychologists and leading experts on psychopathy, this film, I Am Fishhead, delves into the dark world of psychopaths, revealing shocking implications for human beings and our society. So this film, free screening coming up Thursday, April 17th in South Philadelphia, the Guerin Recreation Center, 1600 Jackson Street, and we'll be having free documentary screenings there once a month on the third Thursday of every month. Really looking forward to this new meetup. One more thing, there is a support donation button on the whatonearthishappening.com website. If you feel that you've received value from this radio show or the many podcasts previously that I've done, feel free to make a voluntary donation through the support button on the left-hand side of the whatonearthishappening.com website. It's the only method of support that I have posted on that site. You'll notice I sell nothing. There is nothing merchandised on my entire website. I don't sell advertising. Even the small buttons from other organizations that are posted on my site are done there through just consent, mutual consent, because I happen to agree with some of the agendas that those groups are working toward. And I don't sell advertising on my site. I don't sell any products on my site. So if you feel that you've received value from the information that I've put out over the years, there is a support donation button on the website, completely voluntary. So I want to direct everybody's attention to the whatonearthishappening.com website on the radio show tab. If you're not already there listening to the show live from the radio show tab, go to that radio show tab, because it is there where I post the images for today's show. The images for tonight's show can be found right underneath the player on the radio show tab of whatonearthishappening.com. You'll see them there. They're listed as numerical links. You could click on them and a little slideshow will come up.
Divides a day. Try to run, try to hide. Break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side, yeah.
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on Republic Broadcasting Network. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. So let's jump into the material. Once again, images for what I'm going to be talking about are posted as numerical links on the whatonearthishappening.com radio show tab. Okay, we are in, right now, a time period of the year known as, in the occult, specifically the dark occult, as the season of sacrifice. So what does this mean? What is this time period, and what does it represent? On slide number 1 for tonight, you'll see the image of the zodiac wheel representing the course of 1 year. Okay? I've placed on this image the sun at the middle because what the zodiac constellations really are about are the path of the sun relative to the path of the earth. That's all it really is. It's a way of tracking time. As the year progresses, the sun can be seen to rise in front of a different zodiacal house at approximately a 1 month period. For approximately a 1 month period. Then after a month duration, it can be seen to be rising on the eastern horizon in front of a different zodiacal house. Okay? This is just a method of looking at the solar movement, or really it's the Earth's movement around the sun during the course of a year, like one big clock, with 12 hour hands, but they really represent 1 month. Okay, so each zodiacal house represents about a month's time. Now, the ancients divided the zodiacal year into quarters. Okay, you had the time period of the year where there were equal amounts of day and night because of the Earth's axis of rotational tilt with respect to its plane of orbit. I know that's a mouthful, but if you just envision the sun at the middle and the Earth going around the sun, making a revolution around the sun in its orbital pathway, you have to also envision that the Earth is tilted with respect to that plane of orbit at approximately 23.5 degree angle. Its axis of rotation is tilted. So that is what creates our seasons. Okay? And when the sun is actually at a 0 degree angle to the equator of the Earth, that is when the Earth, the time period of the year is said to be the equinoxes. And equinox literally means equal night. Equa meaning equal, and nox meaning night in Latin. So it means an equal amount of day and night, all right, throughout the world, basically. This is the spring equinox, which is March 19th or 20th, and the autumn equinox, or fall equinox, which is September 21st or 22nd. At those two times of the year, the sun is actually at a 0 degree angle with respect to the equator of the Earth. So that's a line that is this horizontal line on this image, from equinox, the spring equinox at the left, to the autumn equinox at the right. The vertical line represents the time periods of the year that are known as the solstices. The solstices are the high point of the sun during the course of the year and the low point of the sun during the course of the year. So the summer solstice is around June 20th or 21st. That's when the sun has made its highest angle with respect to the equator of the Earth. The sun is at the highest point that it is going to be observationally located in the northern hemisphere. Conversely, when the sun is at the winter solstice, that's when the sun is at its lowest observational point with respect to the equator of the Earth. It is actually at a 23.5 degree south angle with respect to the equator, so that's its lowest point that it can observationally be observed in the southern hemisphere. Okay, so throughout the course of a year, the sun makes a journey from the 23.5 degrees south latitude with respect to the equator. Then it goes, as the year progresses, it goes up to the spring equinox, whereas it is at a 0 degree angle with respect to the equator. Then it rises further into the northern hemisphere, and then it finally goes to its apex, which is at 23.5 degrees north latitude, and then it finally starts descending back again and goes past the autumn equinox, which is 0 degrees, again, right at the equator, finally back down to the winter solstice around December 21st, 22nd. The tropics on the Earth, these are latitudinal lines, okay? The 23.5 degree north tropic is when the sun is at the summer solstice. That's called the Tropic of Cancer, because the sun is actually getting ready to enter into the house of Cancer on the zodiac. It will be rising in front of the stars known as the constellation of Cancer at that time period. Conversely, when the sun is at its lowest point, it is at the Tropic of Capricorn, because the sun will be rising in front of the constellation Capricorn at that time period of the Earth. That's 23.5 degrees south latitude below the equator. So the ancients depicted this quarterly time period, the seasons. They quartered the year by placing these two arms of the cross, these four arms, I guess you could say, the two crossbars of the cross forming four arms, the solstices, summer and winter solstice, and the equinoxes, spring and autumn equinox. And this formed a huge cross, which was what the sun was then placed upon. Again, this is all astrotheological underpinnings of Christianity, of exoteric Christianity that is based on astrotheology. We're not talking about the true esoteric tradition of real esoteric Christianity. We're talking about the astrotheological tale that is spun and given to the masses, the hordes of ignorant people, and told a story about the sun, and they're actually, giving that to people and telling them it's about the Savior of the world, when in fact they're giving them a story about the sun. I've talked about this extensively on former broadcasts. I'm not going to get into the full story of astrotheology today. But another way of looking at this zodiacal breakdown of the year is that there really only were two seasons. The high point of the sun, when it's in the northern hemisphere, which is where most life on Earth is, and then the low season of the sun, the time that it was in the southern hemisphere. So from the spring equinox to the autumn equinox, the sun is in the northern hemisphere of the Earth. And that's the planting and growing season, and really the harvesting season as well. At least most of the harvesting season is during that time of the year. So you could call this top portion of the zodiacal year from, the top 90 degrees, the top 180 degrees, I should say, from the spring equinox to the autumn equinox. You could call this the season of life or the season of light, because that's when the sun is having efficacy and power in the northern hemisphere, and that's when crops grow for the majority of people on the earth. Then there was a season of darkness. That's a 6-month period where the sun is in the southern hemisphere, where much less of the population of the earth is actually located, far less. So this was known by the ancients as the season of death. Okay, it's the season that crops do not grow, and winter is coming in, and you're not going to do any real growing or harvesting of a lot of crops that sustain life, plant life that sustains life in the southern hemisphere. So that was a season of shutdown. That was a season of life going into dormancy. That was a season of plants going into dormancy. And that was a season of basically bunkering down and having to survive during inhospitable climate during that time of the year. Hence, it was known as the season of death or the season of darkness. Now, the ancients also had midpoints of these four seasons. Okay, spring, summer, autumn, and winter. The midpoints were also celebrated as important times of the year, particularly in occult circles. All right, these are known as Sabbats, S-A-B-B-A-T, and it's one of the places we get the word Sabbath from. So the Sabbath was a high holiday. All right, and it was different celebrations for different times of the year. The midpoint of spring, in which the fixed sign of the zodiac known as Taurus was the representation of the spring season, the bull. Okay? It's an earth sign. And again, it's one of what's called the fixed signs of the zodiac, forming what's known as the Great Cross. The Lesser Cross is, as we've already talked about, the cross of the solstices and equinoxes. But the Grand Cross was a galactic cross. See, the solstice and equinox cross, or the Lesser Cross, was the cross of the solar system. But then there's a galactic or Great Cross, which is formed by the midpoints of the seasons. We'll pick that up right on the other side of this break. Stay with us. Beginning the breakdown of the occult season of sacrifice to help everyone to understand what this time period is in the world of the occult, specifically the dark occult. We were talking about the seasons, how the ancients viewed the breakdown of the year as two basic seasons, one of light and life and one of darkness and death. And they had these midpoints that they celebrated, depicted here by these red arrows that go right through the middle points of the season, in the middle of each central zodiacal house, which are the fixed signs of the zodiac, forming what is known as the Grand Cross or the Galactic Cross, because it actually sets the reference for the center and edge of the Milky Way galaxy. So the midpoint of spring was known as Walpurgisnacht, or Saint Walpurgis's night, and it was May 1st, May Day, simply. That's the midpoint of spring. The midpoint of summer was, and I'll just briefly tell you what these seasons represented. The midpoints represented. This holiday represented fertility and the emergence of life, and also offering a sacrifice of some kind to ensure bountiful harvests during the coming growing and harvesting season. So again, spring is the planting season, where you want to get all your crops into the ground so that they grow bountifully and you have a good harvest so that you can feed yourself and your society throughout the winter period, the season of death. The midpoint of the summer season was known as Lammas. It's August 1st, or simply referred to as midsummer. And this was a season of thankfulness. It was a harvesting time of the year. It was a celebration of bounty and life again. And also it was being thankful for what you did have at harvest or prior to harvest, because you knew that it was going to be time soon to dig in for the time period of darkness in which time the sun was going into the southern horizon and would basically stay there for 6 coming months. The midpoint of the autumn season was known as Samhain or Hallowmas. We know it as Halloween. And it was celebrated around October 31st at the midpoint of Scorpion. Again, the midpoint of Leo is the midpoint of the summer. Okay, Leo is the lion. It's depicted as the lion because that's the time that the sun is roaring, and it's the time that the rays of the sun are emerging like a lion's mane. So very symbolic depictions. Again, the bull was chosen for the zodiac of Taurus because that's when the sun is beginning its charge up into the northern hemisphere, and it's charging toward its time period of greatest strength in the summer. The scorpion represented the time period when the sun was losing its power. Hence, it was stung by the venom of a creature like the scorpion. and it was on its way down to its lowest point of power, the winter solstice. So Hollow Mass was always about the going into the season of death and looking on back on lost loved ones. It was a reflection time of the year, because you knew you were heading into the darkest and coldest point of the year, which is when the sun is at its lowest point of power in the winter. So October 31st, or the midpoint of fall Sabbath, Samhain, was about reflection and about the pondering of impermanence and death, and also about, again, preparation. So the last midpoint or Sabbath was February 2nd, which is known as Candlemas, or in some other older traditions like the Druidic tradition, it was called Imbolc. And this was a time period for looking forward to the coming year, because, again, the beginning of the year was always looked at the time period when the sun would rise forward into the northern hemisphere of the earth. Again, the spring equinox, that was more celebrated as the beginning of the year than any other time period. Certainly not like we do in January, which is a more arbitrarily chosen point. The ancients viewed the time period when the sun would begin to rise up into the northern hemisphere as the beginning of at least the zodiacal year. In other ancient traditions, they viewed the low point of the sun as the birth and death point of the cycle. So because, it's at its lowest point, or its death, and it's also at the point where it's going to begin to come up toward the northern hemisphere again to restart its circular journey around the course of its perceived revolution around the Earth. So the midpoint of winter, or Imbolc or Candlemas, was celebrated at February 2nd, and this was a time period of prediction, of looking forward to the coming year, and also of making resolutions for the coming year, saying what you were going to do to create change, and hopefully following through with it. So it was a time of looking forward, and it was also a time where, the darkest and coldest period of the winter was, starting to move on, and you were looking forward to that spring time period at the spring equinox, when warmer climate would lie ahead, and you would the sun would be emerging out of its tomb of the period time, the half of the year known as the time period of death or darkness, and coming back up into the northern hemisphere. So if we move to slide number 2, we can see this is another representation just showing where the sun is at particular times of the year. Again, it's at its lowest point between Sagittarius and Capricorn. That's when it's at the Tropic of Capricorn, 23.5 degrees south with respect to the equator. Then it's at its midpoints at the equinoxes, okay? And specifically at the spring equinox, it's rising up into the northern hemisphere, okay? If we then follow its progression, it goes up to the summer solstice. That's when it's at the Tropic of Cancer at the top of the zodiac. And then it turns back around and comes back down to the fall equinox, the autumn equinox, and then back down to the winter solstice, and repeats the cycle all over again. The special time period I'm talking about is from the time just after the spring equinox. Again, the spring equinox is March 19th or 20th, depending on the year. It's the time period the sun is exactly at 0 degrees with respect to the equator of the Earth, meaning there are equal amounts of day and night, and the sun is rising into the northern hemisphere from the southern hemisphere. So the March 22nd is a very important date, and it's very synchronistic and synchromistic that my seminar in Asheville on New Age BS was conducted on March 22nd, because that's a very dark date, or a dark holiday, I guess you could say, for the dark occult. And I use it as an opportunity to spread some light to people in the Asheville area. And people came from all over the country for that event. I mean, there were people from California, Florida, New England, Ohio, Kansas, you name it, all over the entire continental United States. People gathered to check out this seminar. I was awed by it, and really appreciative that so many people traveled from so far away. And there were some Asheville locals there as well. So really good, diverse crowd. And this date is very important because it represents the third day after the exact time period where the sun is exactly at the equatorial point, 0 degrees with respect to the Earth's equator. 3 days after that, the sun is said to emerge from its tomb. And again, here we come into alignment with the astrotheological story of Jesus. He rises from the tomb after 3 days because he is the light of the world. The sun is the light of our world, the Savior that renews us each spring season and stays in the northern hemisphere until he finally goes into that fall period and then dies on the cross of the zodiac at the winter solstice. So again, this is astrotheological tale of religion. And we'll pick this up right on the other side of the break, and I'll fully explain when is the season of sacrifice when we come back.
People going nowhere, seeking for a ride, looking for the answers that they know inside, searching for a reason, looking for a rhyme. No one knows that path doesn't grind. Don't they ever have to worry? Don't you ever wonder why? It's the part of me that tells you, don't you ever say die.
Freedom, man. That's what it's all about. You've got to groove on freedom, like the good book says.
Welcome back, everyone. You are listening to What on Earth is Happening here on Republic Broadcasting. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. We're into hour 2 of the show this evening, talking about the occult season of sacrifice. Kind of a little bit of a review for long-time listeners, but I really want people who are new listeners on Republic Broadcasting to understand this material. It's critical to understand, especially at this time period of the year. So, let's go back to slide number 2 on the whatonearthishappening.com radio show page. I was talking about the time period of the year where the sun actually breaks the plane of the equatorial plane. The sun actually moves from the 0 degree mark to just above the position that represents the 0 degree point, the actual equatorial plane. And when the solar disk fully breaks that plane, that day is March 22nd. Again, the equinox is March 19th or 20th. And then 3 days after that, the sun is said to fully emerge from its tomb. The light, the God's sun, emerges from its tomb, from its period of death. It had died 3 months prior to that, or in other words, days during the zodiacal year. Okay? The 3-month period from when it entered the house of Capricorn, progressing through Aquarius, through Pisces. That's the death season of the sun. It's the darkest time of the year. That's winter. Okay? The darkest and coldest time of the year. Finally, when the sun breaks the equatorial 0 degree point and starts making its way back up to the northern hemisphere, the season of life begins again and the world is rejuvenated. And that's the time of life bursting forward, and spring, the emergence of spring, and things start to grow again. And we move into the planting season. And I'm not going to belabor this too much because we've already really gone into this. If people really want to hear a more extensive breakdown, you could check out show number 51 and 52, where I break down fully the season of sacrifice. But I'm just doing a review here. And at the bottom of this slide, you'll see a couple of Masonic tracing boards. In esoteric Freemasonry, this is well known that the path of the sun, and it represents symbolically light and darkness within the individual, and our journey, our path in consciousness, that we need to get away from earthbound identification and to higher godly thoughts, that represent light. And so the first degree tracing board, which is the tracing board of the entered apprentice, again, I've broken it down extensively over in many past shows, but just to do a very fast review, if you turn this tracing board onto its side 90 degrees clockwise or to the right, you'll see that what it really represents is the earth being the checkerboard floor of the house, which is that represents the lines of latitude and longitude of the earth. And that's the western direction because the earth is currently in darkness. And we need to move east toward the eastern direction up the ladder. And as we move up the ladder in consciousness, we're moving out of the season of darkness, which is down in the southern hemisphere, the direction south pinpointed there at the bottom, which represents the time of darkness, and progressing up to the light of the sun. Okay, so which is the light moving toward the northern hemisphere at the summer solstice. And the three initiates on the ladder represent knowledge, which is the desire to step into knowledge is coming off the floor of the house. True care is the green initiate in the middle, the place of balance, holding the key, which is the generative principle of care, of true care. And then finally, to right action, the initiate holding the child at the top of the ladder, which represents the solar child, the savior of the world, which is right action in the world. It's a beautiful symbol if it's decoded properly. Many people don't know the first thing about decoding any Masonic symbolism, including Masons, believe it or not, first and foremost, because they're Masons in name only, and they have no idea what the true esoteric tradition of Freemasonry is even intended to be about. They're in it for an old boys' club of receiving and doing favors for other people, not about receiving true moral instruction and the real difference between right and wrong modalities of behavior, which is what esoteric, true Freemasonry is supposed to be about, not the watered-down nonsense that is taught in lodge systems today, where they don't even teach them the proper decoding of their own symbolism. It's similar to what the church has done with esoteric Christianity, turning into exoteric Christianity and just turning it into a control system. It's no different. But this tracing board on the right-hand side is known as the tracing board of Tubal-Cain in the lower right-hand corner of slide number 2. This cryptic tracing board is about the season of death and darkness at the bottom portion, in which case the soul is actually in a tomb. And then that we need to burst forth from that tomb into the light of the northern hemisphere, where the light is actually present, the season of life and light and enlightenment. And unfortunately, when we do that, we see that the world is in ruins. It's not a pleasant thing. The world is, we burst forth from that tomb of darkness of not being able to see the world as it really is. And when we finally do emerge into the light of day, we notice that the world is a horrible place. And it's a place of decay and death and ruin. And our job is to rebuild it, in a way that is in keeping with common sense and with truth and with right behavior, according to natural law. If Freemasonry is understood in the proper sense, people would receive those teachings, which is its original intent in the esoteric Masonic tradition, certainly not the exoteric lodge system tradition as it is taught today. But I've, again, gone over that so extensively in former podcasts on Freemasonry. You could get that all in the whatonearthishappening.com podcast archive. Just go to the podcast section, do a search on page for Freemasonry, and I did something like 10 or 12 podcasts on that tradition, breaking down pretty much all of its symbolism. So not to belabor that point, let's move on to slide number 3 about the season of sacrifice. This is the last slide about this particular topic for tonight. The date March 22nd is the official beginning of the season of sacrifice. Many rituals and many important symbolic things that were carried out are often done on March 19th. You could say March 19th is really the beginning of the season of sacrifice because it's the spring equinox. So many people will consider that's the actual beginning. I would say the official in earnest beginning of this occult season of the year, this 1/8 portion of the year, in other words, the first half of the spring season, is actually March 22nd. And it comprises the last 9 days of March, from March 22nd to 31st, the entire month of April, and the first day of May, May 1st. That makes a total of 40 days. Again, that's a very highly symbolic and biblically symbolic number. 40-day time period represents a journey. It represents an odyssey. It represents a sacred journey in consciousness, biblically, throughout time, actually, in all kinds of esoteric traditions. 40 days is a symbolic spiritual period. Now, in the dark occult, okay, it's a very negative period. Now, they may not even look at it like that, but for the bulk of humanity, this is a dark time period. They look at it like a time to celebrate by giving a blood sacrifice to the sun and the earth. This is what you have to understand about dark occultists. Their god is literally the sun in many cases. Of course, it's the ego. Of course, it's the dark force which divides the consciousness of humanity, which you could call the opposer, the adversary, Satan. It doesn't make a difference what you want to refer to that force as. It's the adversarial force of consciousness. I don't look at it as an embodied entity, nor do they. But the sun is in many ways viewed as the literal or physical god of their tradition, of the dark occult tradition, which they will often refer to as Lucifer, the one who wants to be like the god of creation because of his form of light. And their form of light is dark light, the dark sun. That is their order, the order of death, the order of the dark sun. What this represents is knowledge being wielded as a weapon, the dark sun. It's the skull and the bones, intellect and action with no compassion, with no heart, with no spirit. We'll pick up this symbolism of the season of sacrifice on the other side of this break. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening. We'll be right back. Back, everyone. This is What on Earth is Happening. I've been breaking down the occult season of sacrifice and some of its symbolic imagery. One of the images is the skull and bones. Again, they use the date 322, which is the beginning of the season of sacrifice, to actually represent their lodge. This is a clandestine lodge known as the Order of Skull and Bones, or the Order of Death, because it represents the dark sun. Once again, the dark side of the sun is the dark side of knowledge. It's using knowledge, which is represented by the skull. That's where knowledge it takes place, within the brain, and the skull is the symbol of that. And then the bones, the crossbones, represent taking action with that knowledge, but you'll notice that there's something that's missing. Heart or care or the spirit is absent from that equation. So that's why they choose that symbolism. And you'll see it there on the left-hand side of image number 3 for tonight. You'll see the coffin of Hiram Abiff. This is the Masonic Hiram Abiff represents the Masonic Christ. He is the Masonic symbol of enlightenment. And it's about the soul's journey out of darkness and into light, out of the state of spiritual deadness, emerging from his coffin and resurrecting. Okay, from a state of spiritual deadness or spiritual darkness to a place of enlightenment, to a mindset of enlightenment in consciousness. So on the coffin of Hiram Abiff here on the 3rd degree tracing board, you'll see the symbol of the skull and bones. That's what keeps Hiram Abiff in his grave. You have to transcend the skull and bones and develop true care in order to emerge from the grave, from the coffin of spiritual infancy and spiritual deadness. It's actually, again, a very beautiful symbol if it's decoded properly. Once again, many people have a very singular or unidimensional way of seeing Masonic symbolism and imagery, and this is largely propagated because Freemasonry has been co-opted and turned into something that is quite dark and not used for anything resembling its original intent or purpose, as I've said before. to continue on the season of sacrifice, what we need to understand about it is a time period which was traditionally about offering a sacrifice in the form of a blood sacrifice of animals or human beings to the sun and the earth at the beginning of the planting season of the year, or in other words, the first half of spring. If you look at the season of life, the 180-degree section of the zodiac at the top portion in the previous images I gave, you could break that down into 4 quarters. You have the 2 seasons, which, that's the quarter of the whole zodiac, spring and summer. But you each break those down into 2 components. So you have the midway points that separate those 2 seasons. The midpoint of Taurus, which is May 1st, Walpurgisnacht, and the midpoint of summer, which is August 1st, or Lammas Day. And that would therefore quarter that top portion of the zodiac, the top half, into 4 quarters. And the first quarter of that first season, or in other words, the first half of spring, okay, is the season of sacrifice. In other words, from the spring equinox to the midpoint of spring, the middle of Taurus, May 1st. And like I said, officially, if you really want to be technical about it, it is March 22nd, or 3 days after the beginning of spring, 3 days after the spring equinox, when the solar disk has fully emerged into the northern hemisphere until the midpoint of spring. Again, the reason for this is because this is planting season. And if the sun is your god that you're essentially worshiping as the giver of life on the earth in a physical sense, because that's what sustains life and grows crops that you're going to be dependent upon for life during the coming year, then you want to offer that god the sacrifice at the very point of his coming to power, which is the beginning of spring, specifically the first half of spring. So this is still done, because the people who are this solar cult, who essentially came out of the ancient world and developed the systems of astrotheology and modern religion, are still in control. They still rule the world. And they are still practicing their rituals of sacrifice. And they do it in different ways now. They don't march people up a pyramid and carve their heart out with an obsidian blade. They don't tie someone down to a stone altar and, cut them open and let them bleed all over the stone anymore. They may do this in private rituals and ceremonies that they keep well hidden from the public, but in public, a different form of sacrifice takes place. And these are commonly known as, in today's parlance, false flag operations. They are psyops, psychological warfare operations, in the form of rituals. These are modern-day rituals of blood sacrifice that are conducted throughout the course of the year. And it's amazing if you really look at the patterns. And some people will say, oh, you're just seeing what you want. You're seeing the patterns you want. This is confirmation bias, etc., and so forth. And once again, I'll preface this by saying, hey, believe whatever you want. But nobody's going to tell me that all of these things don't amount to something that is larger than coincidence when I read you this list. Okay? Especially when you look at all the justifications that have followed these acts, and how many people have perished in these acts, and how long the media has gone on and on and on about them, and how politicians and control-based groups have all used these horrible, horrific circumstances as justifications to peddle forth draconian agendas. All right, nobody's going to tell me that's just coincidence that these all happened during this 40-day time period of the year. All right, so I'll read a short list. All right, and that's all I'm bringing this forward for people to keep in mind. You have to understand, this is a time period these psychopath lunatics love to trot out an event to get people in deep levels of fear and give up more of their rights. So now is the time period to be hyper vigilant. I'm not saying anything's definitely going to happen. I'm saying it may very well occur during this 40-day period, which we are already in, which started on March 22nd, 1 week ago, and which progresses until May 1st, May Day. All right? So you really have to be on guard. Be vigilant during this time. This is the time, if some event happens, it's almost guaranteed it's a false flag event. And it's done as a blood ritual, a bloodletting ritual during the season of sacrifice. Okay? So let's look at some of the events that have occurred during this season. The battles of Lexington and Concord were actually initiated by the British Empire against America. The opening acts, the opening volleys of the First American Revolution, April 19th, 1775, the battles of Lexington and Concord. And folks, let me tell you something. They love April 19th and 20th. If there's a particular date they love, that's it. Especially April 19th and 20th. Especially April 20th. If I even had to say one particular date. They love those two dates. Okay? That time period is special for these psychopath dark occultists. All right? I can't tell you exactly why it's around that date, but I know they love those two dates. And if there's any dates you want to watch and see, is an event going to be taking place on this date that is there to inject fear into the consciousness of humanity, it is April 19th and 20th. All right? Above all other dates of the year. So April 19th, 1775, the British initiate the battles of Lexington and Concord. April 19th, once again, 1861, the Baltimore riots in Baltimore, Maryland. 13 people are killed during those riots. We'll pick up this list on the other side. Stay right there.
There's a code of silence that we don't dare speak. There's a wall between us and a river so deep. We keep pretending that there's nothing wrong. There's a code of silence and it can't go on.
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on Republic Broadcasting. I want to wrap up this spot on the season of sacrifice, maybe go to a couple of calls, and then I want to break into the second portion of tonight's show, which is to talk about psychopathy and its origins. So, this 40-day time period, all of these different events have happened within it. The battles of Lexington and Concord, the Baltimore riots, in which 13 people, another symbolic number, was killed, April 19th, 1861. The sinking of the Titanic occurred April 14th and into April 15th, 1912, resulting in 1,512 deaths. And folks, if you don't understand that was about really the murder of one individual, and 1,511 souls got caught up in a dispute between some elites, I feel bad for you, because that was about the Rothschild dynasty taking out one of the people who actually could have stood against them because of his enormous wealth as an industrialist, which was John Jacob Astor. And you don't think that these psychopathic lunatics would kill 1,500 people to get one person who could actually stand against them because of the enormous wealth he possessed, and he was challenging their agenda to bring in the Federal Reserve System at that time. You have another thought coming to you. So that's the kind. Again, like they'll kill 3,000 innocents to usher in some war in the Middle East to seize, resources that they want. These aren't people who think like you and I or have the moral sensibilities that you or I do. To ascribe our moral or ethical sensibilities to a psychopath is making a critical error in judgment. We'll talk about that later in the show. So the assassination of Martin Luther King during the season of sacrifice, April 4th, 1968. Again, someone who was making significant inroads into the challenging of the dominant paradigm, and who people were listening to. The Waco massacre. Again, the massacre at Waco, April 19th, 1993. They love this date. There's the third one. Okay, here's another one, the Oklahoma City bombing, April 19th, 1995. See, we're getting into rapid progression now, almost every year, every other year. The Port Arthur, Australia massacre, which ended up with total gun confiscation within the whole country of Australia. April 28th, 1996. The Heaven's Gate cult suicides, very strange with occult ritual overtones, possible MK Ultra mind control type stuff going on in San Diego, California. March 26th, 1997. I don't have the total number of deaths there. I'm sure it's some sort of a symbolic number. These lunatics, these lunatic dark occultists do love their ritualistic numbers and their gematria. The West Side Middle School massacre in Arkansas, March 24th, 1998. Again, at the beginning portion of the season of sacrifice. Here's a huge one to try to justify, weapons bans and, continued gun confiscation. The Columbine high school shootings, April 20th, 1999. Again, there's April 20th, Hitler's birthday as well, April 20th, 420. The Columbine shootings, again, that's another one named after the goddess. A lot of these rituals and blood sacrifices will be named after the goddess. Columbia is the name of the goddess because that's the destruction of care, the immolation of care, the cremation of care. See, it's just another symbolic of the burning of the goddess, another form of symbolism regarding the burning of care. So the Columbine shootings, April 20th, 99. The Iraq War begins on March 19th, the very beginning of the season of sacrifice. You could say that's even a couple days before its official opening. Right at the spring equinox. Okay, so the Iraq war begins with the shock and awe bombing campaign, which is actually another reference symbolically to the goddess, because it's not just shock and awe, it's Shekinah. Shekinah. The Shekinah is a Hebrew term to represent the feminine force, okay, invoking the feminine destructive force. Actually, it's like the Shiva force, okay, in the Eastern traditions, the Shekinah. And that was the occult overtones that opened up the war in Iraq on March 19th, 2003, the second Iraq war that was. So then we have the Virginia Tech massacre. Virginia Tech University, April 16th, 2007. Again, another pre-justification for starting to claim that we have to ban certain kinds of firearms. Okay? And again, named after the goddess, done at a school where it's named after the goddess, the Virgin. Okay? More goddess symbolism in a bloodletting sacrifice ritual. April 16th, 2007. The Moscow subway bombings, the metro bombings, were done on March 29th, 2010. The beginning of the BP oil spill, Hitler's birthday, April 20th, 2010. Okay? Which the toll is still going on uncalculated for that ecological disaster. Libya. The United States invaded Libya a few years back on March 19th. Once again, the very beginning of the season of sacrifice, March 19th, 2011. Libya was invaded. And just last year, the Boston bombing, April 15th, at the very, almost the middle point, just around the middle point of the season of sacrifice, April 15th, 2013, the Boston Marathon bombings. I mean, if you just think all that's just coincidence, I would make the statement you're a coincidence theorist. People will say, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. You think there's something to all of those dates. Well, in relationship to the significance of the season that is actually real and practiced by the dark occult, yes, that there isn't anything that is just coincidental about that. That is something that is deliberately done and planned for. If you ask me, Again, you can call me conspiracy-minded, but I've been involved in the dark occult myself. I know who these people are. I know what their personality type is. I know that they're psychopathic people. And I know they wouldn't hesitate for a moment, if it serves their agendas, to kill any number of human beings that they feel that they need to kill in a psyops ritual to get their agendas put forward. So people need to be aware this is real. This is still practiced by this dark priest class and these dark occult religionists. This is their religion. That's their belief system. You don't have to believe in it. Once again, you don't need to believe in what these psychopaths believe. They believe in it and they act on it. And if we don't understand their belief system, we're going to still see these events take place and play out and think it's all just coincidence and there's nothing to it, when in fact these are deliberately orchestrated events during a specific time period to carry out specific agendas that ordinarily they wouldn't be able to push through. So this time period that we are in right now is the time period we need to be the most hyper vigilant about false flags. And I think that's all I'll really say on that topic for this evening. I think I've given enough information to whet people's appetite. And let's go to the phones. And then we'll move on to our second topic for tonight, which is psychopathy. Let's go to Joe in Los Angeles. Joe, you're live on What on Earth is Happening. Welcome.
Hey, Mark. So nice to finally talk to you. I've been listening to you for quite a while. Let me start with thanking you for all the massive amounts of occulted information that you have brought to the light, so to speak. You changed me. I definitely use the ancient mystery tradition of tarot. I use it with regular cards, and let me tell you, AE talks about not using it for fortune telling, but it absolutely works to tell the truth. It really, really does. And the symbols you're talking about with this masonry lecture, it all fits. So when I was researching it further, based on your podcast, I use old masonry dictionaries, alchemic dictionaries, to get the meanings of the symbolisms, and it's mind-boggling the amount of not only how it's all the same with all these traditions, but then the synchronicities that begin to occur in your life.
Yes,
you start to see these things on bumper stickers and license plates and everything like that.
Hey, Joe, stay right there. I'll let you pick this up on the other side of the break, and you can go to your question. Just hold on and stay with us. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back after this break. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening. Everyone, you're listening to What on Earth is Happening. Let's go back to Joe in Los Angeles. Joe, you were making a point, and then I think you were going to get to a question. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I was. I was just finishing up on just the tarot, how accurate you are about your information about the tarot and all the ancient mystery traditions.
Yes.
As well as veganism. It absolutely opens up the body and the mind. I can't even tell you how much spirituality is entering into me, especially now that we're in fourth density. A quick comment about what you were saying, the BP oil spill. That is definitely a blood sacrifice. The blood of the earth is oil.
That's right.
I don't know if a lot of people realize that, but that is the blood of the earth. If somebody put an oil rig on your body and started sucking blood, you'd know it in about 2 seconds.
So that was a bloodletting ritual for the earth herself. They were attacking the earth goddess herself right there.
Absolutely. And people that don't, I can understand not seeing it and this awakening process, but once you hear that and learn that, if you don't believe that, you are like what you call the unbegun, because if you cannot see that, I mean, they're trying to kill us, dominate us and this earth, and they're doing it. They're doing a beautiful job.
Just think about all the names, okay? You know, you have You have the Port Arthur, King Arthur, a killing of a king ritual. Heaven's Gate. Heaven's Gate, it's an attack on the gates of heaven. Columbine, the goddess. Virginia, the goddess. The BP oil spill was done to the earth with the, letting forth the earth's blood. You think all of that is just accidental? The Boston Marathon done at the place where essentially the American Revolution began. These aren't accidental things. People want to see coincidence everywhere. It's not that people want to see conspiracy everywhere. We're seeing patterns. These aren't imaginary patterns, folks. These are patterns that really exist if you're conscious enough to see them. Go ahead, Joe.
That's very true. No, you're dead on as always. It's true, and it's always this attack on the innocent, the feminine, the children.
Yes.
There is very likely. I still think that coach from Pennsylvania. I think he was just like a child pedophile runner.
Oh, sure.
The truth is going to come out about that. That pedophilia ring is going to have its tentacles in our governments, in the Vatican.
Yeah, Joe Paterno from Penn State. Absolutely, he was part of something way bigger, way bigger. And look at how quickly he died after that all came out. You think that wasn't an accident? You think that was some kind of an accident or coincidence? They needed to take him out before that got out there in a real big way. Was really going on with a pedophile ring at that kind of a level. Absolutely, no doubt about it. He was part of something way bigger. Very low-level person on that totem pole. But he was just watching it happen and did nothing. I don't feel bad for that guy at all. He got exactly what he really deserved. So many people say, oh, what could he have done? He could have done a lot more than what he did. He could have grown a set and come forward and done what was right is what he could have done. And he didn't do that. He just watched it and let it go on unchallenged. So...
If you look at it, he is your stereotypical secondary psychopath.
Right.
He's chasing that golden carrot, just like all these other buttheads with their BMWs and their high-level jobs. Everybody thinking they're going to catch the carrot, and you never are going to catch it, man. You are going to be their bitch, and
right.
People don't realize that.
That's right.
But here's my question, Mark. I could sit and talk to you for days and days and days, man. I'm telling you. But here's my question. You mentioned in an old podcast, I think it was actually an old interview, about how there are off-planet dark forces feeding off our fear, literally feeding off our fear, eating our fear. Please tell me your overall story arc, and where you're headed, like you said at the head of the show. Tell me you're headed in that direction, because some of us really are. Again, I mentioned fourth density. Some of us are there. We are so, I talk about being on this earth and not of it. Man, I don't even belong here. And as the vibrations continue to increase, some of these light workers like me, we really need to know what do you know? Because I know there's much more that you can enlighten us with, and I know it might alienate some people, but
sure. And it will. It certainly will. Not everyone is going to be comfortable hearing some of the things I'm going to talk about in coming weeks on this show. Let's just say it just like that, right out in the open. Okay? But I cannot stay silent about this. I've prepared the way for long enough. Okay? I've given people a little hint or taste or an outline, you could call it, in my video Cosmic Abandonment on my website in the video section. But what I'm going to do in coming weeks, starting tonight if time allows, I'm going to talk about I'm going to get into an extensive breakdown of this and go into source material that backs this worldview, really, is what it is. It's a view of what happened here in the ancient past that led to the current human condition. That's all it really is. And see, a lot of people won't want to hear it because in their mind, they're dedicated that it is impossible. It couldn't happen that way. Because what they don't want to accept or come to an understanding of is that Earth is not metaphorically a farm. It's literally a farm. And I've talked about this before, and I'm not doing this. The other justification people will say why this all can't be true is they'll say, oh, people take this story and run with it because they're disinfo agents that are what they're really trying to do under the surface is they're trying to annihilate hope in humanity. Because if we're fighting something that's truly not human in its origin, then what chance do we have to defeat it? And you know what my answer to that is? we have every chance to defeat it. And no, it wouldn't be disempowering to talk about it out in the open, because it doesn't make a difference if human beings are at the top of this agenda of control, if demonic entities from other dimensions are at the top of this agenda for control, if Satan itself in whatever embodied or disembodied form you might want to imagine that force as, it doesn't make a difference what is controlling it, because the solution is the same: to get out of mind control, to rise in consciousness, and to use the lost word, which is no. I am not your slave, and it doesn't make a difference what you do. I'm not going to be complicit with your agenda to enslave myself or others around me. The end. And when we step into that power of truth, game over, no matter what entity lies behind the system of control.
Yeah, absolutely. And even further, I think people, they don't realize that we really are not human. Well, we're human in this incarnate, but a lot of people think that this is it. And right. I got news for you. This is one of many. You might have come back as a completely different entity, as an animal, as a hammer. I mean, it doesn't matter. The thing is, we are limitless. We are actually indestructible. Our souls are indestructible, right. And people don't realize that.
There's such a multiplicity of forms and forms of consciousness. Consciousness is eternal. It goes on. There is no beginning or end for it. That's what we ultimately are at our essence, period. We are spirit at our very essence. This is just an incarnation for experience to be gathered and for us to learn and grow. And we can't be tied to, identified in matter. That's why so many people are accepting the chains of bondage that we're all in, because they're so identified with this life. They're so identified, they're afraid to die. If you're going to be free, you have to get over the idea that you are just the flesh. And you got to get over the fear of dying. You want to be free, you have to let it all go. You have to be willing to take the chance that you might go into another incarnation. You know, that's when you'll be truly free. You know, but most people, they're not there yet.
It is freedom. You're absolutely right. But once one realizes that, all of a sudden you realize you are eternal. Right. I mean, you look back at your mindset before, thinking, "Oh, what do I got to do? This? I got to hold on to this life. Oh, I don't want to die." I mean, let me tell you. You talk about having no attachment. Try having no attachment to your life, and I got news for you, man. I walk around this earth every day loving that I have absolutely no attachment to that life, and I got news for you. It is empowering as you would not believe.
That's exactly
now
right.
I know.
Joe, thank you so much for the call. Really,
no problem, Mark.
Really great insights you brought up. I appreciate it. We'll continue on the other side of this break, folks. Stay with us.
Freedom, man. That's what it's all about. You've got to groove on freedom, like the good book says.
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on Republic Broadcasting. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. We do have some other callers in the queue, but I'm going to ask them to just be patient. I want to cover some material on psychopathy and its possible origins, and then I'm going to go back to your calls in the second half an hour of this final third hour of the show tonight. And hopefully I could take a bunch of questions about psychopathy and get your take on what its possible origins may be. So I've talked about psychopathy pretty extensively on past shows, so this is, again, another somewhat of a review topic. But let's break down the word first and foremost, and we're working on image number 4, slide number 4 on the whatonearthishappening.com radio show page, or if you're following in the podcast, this is podcast number 149. Psychopathy, if we break down the word, it comes from Greek in its origins. And it comes from the Greek noun psyche. And there it is written in Greek script. And the word psyche or psyche in English means mind. Okay? And the second part of the word, P-A-T-H-Y, psyche, and then P-A-T-H-Y, the second half of the word, comes from the Greek noun pathos. Pathos means suffering in Greek. So we put them together and it means suffering mind, or in other words, sickness of the mind, or suffering of the mind, or in other words, mental illness. That's what psychopathy is. And just think about it, pathology, it's the study of illness or sickness. So when we put that together with the psyche, it's about the illness or the sickness of the mind. That's what psychopathy is at its absolute essence. It is pure mental illness and sickness of the psyche. Really, if you go down to it, it's sickness of the soul. And there are many people who will still to this day insist. I still get emails from them. There's no such thing as psychopathy. It's an invented mental illness, as are all mental illnesses. There's no such thing as a mental illness. I mean, this is how naive people are. These are absolute new age children. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. They're new cage children, to borrow the term from Cameron Day and other researchers, okay? They are children of the new cage movement that haven't grown up, that haven't matured, that don't want to accept the real, that don't want to accept that which is true. Like I've said before in many past podcasts, accept that which is or continue to suffer. Understand and accept truth, or get used to the chains, folks. Get used to the chains of bondage. In other words, respect existence or expect resistance from the universe itself. Okay? Respect that which is, respect existence, or expect resistance from nature itself. Because that's all you're going to get if you want to deny that which is. And the people that want to believe it's all of a huge bed of roses here on the earth. And there's no such thing as mentally ill people. I mean, you're naive children. You're not looking at what is, you're looking at what you want to exist, what you want the reality to be. There are such a thing as mentally ill human beings. Mental illnesses are real. All you need to do is open up your eyes, take off the rose-colored glasses, and look at the behavior that's out there. And you don't think that's a product of psychological illness? Well, what's it the product of? So, I mean, I don't really want emails like that anymore. Okay, look, folks, my mind is made up, not because I have a belief system, because I've done enough study and homework over decades of my life. All right? You're not going to convince me something I know exists doesn't exist. I've studied it extensively from a perspective of psychology and neuroscience. All right? Not pseudosciences. Okay? Psychopathy, psychopathology of the mind exists and is real. Get over it. Get over yourself and your own ego. It's again, you don't want it to exist. You don't want to live in that world where, well, tough. It's such a shame, isn't it? That is the world, however. So get over yourself. Okay? Now, let's just get over the fact that psychopathy exists, and let's look at what it actually is. Because a lot of people are in confusion about what it is. They think it's this Hollywood variant of psychopathy. A psychopath, it's got to be a serial killer, right? It's got to be a total lunatic wielding an axe and going after people at random. That's a psychopath. No, a psychopath could be that, but that's not what a psychopath has to be like. As a matter of fact, most psychopaths are very good at covering up what they are. They become very good actors. In order to survive, they can feign and pretend to be like a normal human being. and they gravitate into positions of power, and they put on that mask, as you see there in image number 4, this husk, this shell, this fake human being that's not even a human being, it's an animal that looks like a human being, puts on the mask and tries to look like a human. That's what a psychopath's really adept at. They're very, very skilled at doing that. And that's why naive people who are really children in their psychological makeup, okay, and haven't grown up and haven't become adult human beings psychologically and spiritually, want to believe there's no such thing. Because they don't want to accept that there are other intelligent beings walking amongst us that look human but are not human. That are animals that walk on 2 legs, but they are not human beings. So-called intelligent creatures, they have intellect, they don't have real intelligence. But they're intellectual creatures that walk on 2 legs, bipedal, they walk like a human being, they have speech, they talk like a human being, they look just like a human being, but they're not a human. And I'm not just trying to dehumanize a class of human beings. I'm telling you factually, definitively, they are not a human being. What makes a human being is that they are truly sentient and have the capacity to feel. A psychopath does not truly have the capacity to feel. They are like a computer program that's running, which is why this image here in image number 4 is so great. I saw that. I did a search for images that represent a psychopath, and this is the one that embodies it perfectly. It's some sort of a husk, a shell, a wraith that looks somewhat like a human when it puts the mask on, but underneath it's an empty husk or a shell that barely even resembles a human being. It's some sort of a shadow, okay? Some empty, degraded husk form that has the vague semblance of a human, but is not a human, most certainly. And until we can understand psychopaths in that regard, you're not going to make any progress in overcoming their influence in this world. Zero. Get used to the chains of bondage, because that's where you're going to be for a long, 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 long time. Until you accept that this condition exists, that it is real, that it is operating around you, and that these beings are not human beings. They are something other than a human being. So let's look at their characteristics, these animals that look human. They're aggressive, callous, and cunning. They are adept, cunning thinkers. They have intellect, cunning intellect, not true intelligence, because true intelligence engages the feminine aspect of the psyche, which is the intuition and the compassion and the creative aspect of intelligence. Holistic intelligence comprises both intellect and the creative, generative side of the psyche, which these beings do not have. They only have the intellectual side. They have a complete absence of conscience and empathy, which we talked about earlier. No conscience, no ability to feel the repercussions of their behavior toward others. We'll continue with this list of the characteristics of psychopaths right after this break. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on Republic Broadcasting. Talking about the characteristics of psychopaths, let's get right back into it. This is slide number 5 on my images for tonight's show. They're aggressive, callous, and cunning. Very intellectual creatures, but not true holistic intelligent beings. Holistically intelligent beings. They have a complete absence of conscience and empathy. They cannot feel the repercussions in their physiology of what they do to others. And when I say that, I mean it literally. Cannot. It's not possible for them to feel empathy. As strange as that is for most people who do have that capacity, okay, there are beings in the universe that is true for. It would be like if you cut off someone's hand. then you cauterized it and sutured it up so they didn't bleed out, they would no longer have a hand. They would no longer have the capacity to grasp something in that hand, in that limb, without some piece of artificial technology. The capacity would no longer be there. That's what a psychopath is like when it comes to the ability to feel. They're very adept at manipulating other people, especially emotional manipulation. Real good at getting to people through their emotions, not the psychopath's emotions, through the people they're manipulating, through their emotions. They can play up to other people's emotions to then manipulate them and get them to do what they want. They have a strong willingness to just take whatever they want and do whatever they please, and it doesn't make a difference who is hurt or wronged. They don't care about right or wrong. It's meaningless to them. They're meaningless ideas to them. That's all right and wrong are. It has nothing to do with natural law. They don't care that natural law exists. They don't care about the repercussions of breaking it. They just want to do whatever they want, take whatever they want. Whoever is wronged, it's meaningless to them. They're an animal. It's not a human being, folks. It's an animal. It's a pure animalistic consciousness embodied in human form. That's what you have to understand that a psychopath is. And get streetwise about this. We need to get streetwise about this. Because these beings are out there among us, feeding off of us. And you know what? People are still in denial of their existence. Still in denial. Because they don't want to believe that's the world they live in. Psychopaths have a deceptive ability to appear outwardly benevolent, and that's because they're really good at feigning normal human emotions. They have a deceptive ability to behave in superficially charming ways to hide purely selfish motives. They have a willingness to use intimidation and violence to control others in order to satisfy their own needs. They have a willingness to intentionally violate the basic inherent human rights of others. Again, as I said, natural law rights are meaningless to these animals. They have a complete absence of any sense of guilt or remorse. So it doesn't matter who's hurt. They're not going to feel guilt. They're not going to feel remorse. They don't have the capacity to feel guilt or remorse. It isn't that they don't want to feel it. They can't feel it. There's a reason, because their limbic brain doesn't work the same way as a normally functioning human's limbic system in the brain, the midbrain. The mammalian brain is broken in a psychopath. And there's a reason it's broken, which we're going to get to. Psychopaths they rationalize their own immoral behavior. So rationalization's a big thing. Oh, I'm not really wrong for doing this. I have a right to do this. I can rationalize it and come up with a reason that it's okay that I just did that harmful behavior. And they'll attempt to lay blame on other people for their own conduct. That's another big characteristic of a psychopath, blaming other people, when in fact their own behavior was harmful. They will outright deny their own wrongdoing. So willful denial of truth is a big thing in psychopaths. They have total contempt toward the feelings and desires of their fellow beings. What you want, justice, truth, right, nobody violating your natural rights, that's meaningless to a psychopath. They don't care. They don't care. You know, if that's two words that sum up this whole list, don't care. That's what a psychopath is. A being that does not care, doesn't have the capacity to care or feel, period. They will pathologically lie, say anything without any concern for truth in order to advance their own hidden agenda. Here's a key point of their personality traits and characteristics. They have a very cunning, manipulative ability to feign normal human emotions and empathy. They watch other people and their behaviors, and they observe how they behave in certain conditions, like when a loved one dies. And they'll observe genuine emotional sadness, and then they'll mimic it like an actor. They will step into that role because they know they're different than other people. They know from a very, very young age that they're not normal human beings, that they're an animal that looks like a human but is not one. And so they have developed this very deceptive ability to act, to play act. You know, watch the TV show Dexter. It's a good example of a secondary psychopath who's play acting and trying to pretend like he feels the same thing that a regular human being feels. While Dexter in that series is not a primary psychopath, he was created as a secondary psychopath at a very young traumatic experience that he underwent. That doesn't mean a primary psychopathy does not exist. There are beings who are born like this, and it is a genetic condition that is a result of a deformation, a mechanism that is not working properly in the human genome, in our genomic code, the code that makes the human species what it is. There are things in that code that are not working right, that are not functioning right. We have anomalies, genetic anomalies in our actual genomic code. Over 4,000 genetic anomalies, genetic deformations that express as different types of diseases, different types of disorders, physically and mentally and psychologically. So, psychopaths also have a completely distorted sense of the consequences of their actions. They don't see the consequences. They just act in the moment like an animal. They don't look at the long-term consequences. So you say psychopaths are destroying the world that they themselves have to live in. Well, that doesn't compute to them. It doesn't matter. They're living fully in instinct because they're an animal without a true ability to care about what they're doing in the present moment that may affect the future, even if it affects their ability to live in the future. That's what you have to understand that a psychopath behaves like. It's so unfathomable to the normally functioning human being that the mind, the soul could be that broken, that the normal mind often wants to reject it and say, my God, how could a creature such as this exist? You're talking about the proverbial vampire, the proverbial demon. Yes, exactly. Now you're getting closer to an understanding, if you think of it in those terms, of what a true psychopath is. They have a total failure to accept any personal responsibility for their own socially irresponsible ways. They will not accept responsibility. So forget trying to say, you're responsible for this, you caused this, you were the causal factor of this. Doesn't matter. They don't care. And they have a strong belief that they will never be brought to justice for their criminal behavior. Totally smug. Arrogance. You'll never beat me. You'll never take me down. I'm the top of the pecking order. I'm the top of the food chain. I deserve to be in the position that I'm in, and I'll be there forever. That's what they think. That's what they think. Let me tell you something, folks. Their reign is not going to last forever. What I want to talk about in the next section is the origin of this condition. So stay with us.
You know the day destroys the night, night divides the day. Try to run, try to hide, break on through to the other side, break on through to the other side, break on through to the other side, yeah.
We have to break on through in our understanding of the truth. And what will lie on the other side of that breakthrough is true freedom. If we are willing to go all the way in that truth, and we're going to start venturing into some pretty uncomfortable areas, and psychopathy is one of them. But you know what's even more uncomfortable than understanding that psychopathy exists? And this is one of the reasons why a lot of people don't want to acknowledge its existence. Because once you understand that this exists, and there's this creature here with us on the earth called the psychopath, which I would say possibly makes up a percent, I mean not even a percent, a portion of 1% of the population of humanity, if that. Once you understand that that condition exists, what you have to do is wrestle with a profound implication. And that is, why does it exist? How was this condition created? Because if it's here with us, there has to be a reason it's here. Something had to make it. Something had to create it and put the psychopath here on Earth with us. So what did that? What is the origin of this seemingly insane condition? Yeah, these are insane people. But I'm saying that the actual idea of it seems crazy and insane to even contemplate that something like this could even exist. To those of us who do have normally functioning emotional makeup, a normally functioning emotional makeup. So my next question that I'm going to pose, and people who call in could take a crack at answering this, is what is the origin of psychopathy? And I'm going to look at just 4 potentials, 4 possibilities, because from here I'm not going to claim I absolutely know the truth of this. I'm going to put what I feel is the best explanation of this out there for people's consideration. So look, folks, I'm not going to claim to know the absolute truth when it comes to this. I feel that I have an educated understanding of this condition because I've studied deeply into what it is and all of the possibilities regarding why it may exist. So from here on forward, in many of the next shows that I do, we have to understand I'm going to enter the realm of speculation. You shouldn't take my word as gospel truth. At any time, you really shouldn't. I've said that from day one. The worst thing you could do is believe me on anything. You need to do your own due diligence. You need to do your own homework. You need to do your own research. You need to do your own reading and digging. You need to apply the trivia methodology, a truth discovery methodology that is based in the scientific methodology to come up with an understanding that is accurate. Don't just believe anybody. When you read other works, when you read source works, which we'll be getting into on future shows, we'll be looking at ancient texts. Okay, we'll be looking at interpretations of those ancient texts. We'll be looking at syntheses of all this information. I'll be reading from a lot of texts. You can't just take everything at face value. You have to compare and contrast it. You have to look at a whole wide, eclectic variety of knowledge and compare and contrast it. Weed out logical inconsistencies and come to a logical conclusion by processing that available information. Then maybe we could bring all those pieces to the table and arrive at knowledge and arrive at truth eventually. So, maybe we should call the future shows on What on Earth is Happening, What on Earth very well may have occurred, and that we have to be willing to be open-minded about looking into so that we can come to an understanding about what very well may have occurred here in the ancient past. Maybe that should be the name for upcoming shows on What on Earth is Happening. Because up to this point, I've covered things that are fairly provably true. And I know are taking place. I could state I know that they are taking place. Here, I could say I'm making a best educated hypothesis regarding what occurred here that led to the current human condition. So again, nobody should be taking this as 100% gospel truth. You shouldn't be doing that with any of my work. No one should be doing that with anybody's work. You should always look at it, compare and contrast it, and then come to a conclusion about it after you've processed the information in great depth. That having been said, let's look at 4 possible origins for the condition called psychopathy. Possibility number 1, and I've heard this from a lot of people who I've posed the question to, hey, tell me where you think psychopathy came from. And people will say it's completely natural. This is a natural evolutionary condition. You know what, people? I personally think this is the most dangerous view to take. I personally think that this is the most, and not to just color this first possibility, we have to consider it, okay? Not to just color it negative and evil right on its face. I'm just saying I personally feel that this is the product of a very poisoned worldview when people think, I've heard people say, I think psychopaths are the alpha humans. These are the people who deserve to be in charge and rule the planet. I've actually heard people state that. That's like saying, how I think of myself is that I actually belong in bondage. I belong in slave chains. That's that worldview. It's no different. It's no different than saying, these are the people I believe should be my rulers and slave masters, because they have no emotions and no ability to feel. So somehow nature made that condition and has allowed these people to rule the roost of humanity through absolute ruthlessness, viciousness, and immorality. And somehow that's a right condition that should continue in nature, because my Darwinian religion tells me that that's the quote-unquote natural order. Well, you know what I think of people who think like that? I think they are extensive fools who have bought into a religion called Darwinism, who believe that they are somehow rightfully slaves on this planet, and somehow total absolute lunatics who are mentally ill are somehow in a rightful position of rulership in this world. That's mental illness in and of itself, ladies and gentlemen. So, that's my view on this position, personally. But let's just look at what this position states. That psychopathy is a natural occurrence in nature. It's natural. Nature made us this way. It made a certain subset of humanity this way. That psychopathy is a naturally occurring phenomenon. It's a set of characteristics which developed in humanity, or I should have put down, developed in a subset of humanity, as part of, quote, I should have wrapped this in quote, evolutionary adaptation of our species to certain environmental conditions. And, extreme survival circumstances can create psychopathic tendencies. If you're constantly in fight-flight mode and you're unable to leave that condition mentally and psychologically, you can become a secondary psychopath. I'm not really talking about secondary psychopathy in this question, where did psychopathy come from? I'm talking about primary genetic type 1 or primary psychopathy. The kind of psychopathy that is created through environmental stressors or conditions is secondary psychopathy, which is reversible. Secondary psychopaths were normally functioning human beings with the ability to feel and empathize at some past point in their lives. And then they lost that due to a traumatic circumstance which they were unable to overcome or escape. Okay? So prolonged fight or flight conditions can create secondary psychopaths. So you could look at it as, did prolonged survival circumstances create a subset of psychopathic people? The reason I don't think that's the case, even though, yes, that's possible, okay, is even after prolonged set of survival conditions is in effect, and it may no longer be in effect, there are still people born with primary psychopathy, genetic psychopathy. So that's why I don't personally think that this explanation or possibility holds much water. There are people who may agree with it, and that's fine. I'm not going to tell you must agree with me, but I don't believe if you apply Occam's razor, in a sense, to this hypothesis, this possibility number one, that it holds up. Personally, that's my take. Okay? Plus, I don't see that as a true evolutionary adaptation. I think true evolution means we're going toward a higher form of existence in consciousness. And true evolution means we're moving into a more moral place in our being, in our consciousness. Not a less moral one, which is what a psychopath certainly is. So people shouldn't look at these as the alpha humans. They should look at them as the absolute last in line when it comes to the evolutionary development of humanity. They are the ones that are leftovers, if anything, from a prior quote-unquote evolutionary lineage. Okay? This is the lowest form of evolutionary life on the totem pole of human form, because it is absolutely not a true human being. It is something that lacks the genuine characteristics of a real human being. Which is why I don't accept possibility number one personally. Once again, I'm throwing it out there as a potential. Okay? And people should seriously entertain it as a notion and really think about it. Absolutely. Again, I have done that process of taking this in and processing it and really deeply thinking about all the possibilities when it comes to this possibility number one, that psychopathy is a naturally occurring phenomenon, and it was an evolutionary quote-unquote adaptation. And I personally reject that as the answer to the reason that primary psychopathy exists. So let's look at the second, third, and fourth possibilities for psychopathy's existence in our world when we come back after this break. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening? Stay with us. Everyone, final segment of What on Earth is Happening here this evening on Republic Broadcasting. I'm going to just briefly outline these other three possibilities, and then I'm going to try to take a few phone calls so as not to leave the callers hanging. I know I wanted to get more calls in, but I'll go over these possibilities next week as well as a review before I get into some new material. Possibility number 2. For the possible origins of psychopathy in humanity. It was created by God. God did it. And psychopaths were put here on the earth alongside human beings as some form of punishment to torment human beings for reasons unknown. The creator of the universe just made this absolute condition of mental illness and lunacy and placed these animals here with us to torment us and eat us and, keep us as their slaves somehow, as some form of punishment for something we don't even understand that we did. I see this also as a very dark worldview, as a poisoned worldview, as a dangerous position to take because it leads one to believe that it's all just predetermined and since God did it, there's nothing you could do to fight it. If anything is disempowering, it's that worldview. I also don't take this position. I look at the two final possibilities that I'm going to propose as really the only sensible or possible ones. And that leads us to possibility number 3 on slide number 8. So we went through slide 6 and 7 as the first two possibilities. Slide number 8, possibility number 3. Human beings did this to ourselves. We created this condition in humanity because in our ancient past we may have arrived at a culture, a civilization of high technology at some point in our ancient past where we developed genetic technology and we performed a form of genetic manipulation upon ourselves or a subset of our species in an attempt to somehow create new capabilities in our species or improve upon our species. But in our inaccuracy in our genetic manipulation, we inadvertently created certain conditions in the human genome, and psychopathy was one of them. So we inadvertently created it ourselves. Now, that's if you believe the worldview that humanity was once a very high civilization, but it kind of forged its own path and was in control of its own destiny. That's not my particular worldview or how I see the ancient past having played out. And I'm going to be getting into why I don't think that this is the case and why the fourth possibility is the one that I most subscribe to for the actual origin of this condition. And that leads us to slide number 9, that it's possibility number 4, that something else did this to us, something other than humanity. In other words, something that was non-human, regardless of what you think that may be or what its nature is. I'm not going to sit here and argue and debate over the nature of what that thing was, that non-human form of intelligence. But essentially, this possibility could be described like this: some other form of intelligence that is decidedly not human created the condition of psychopathy within a subset, at least a subset of humanity, of human beings, either deliberately or inadvertently through some form of genetic modification or manipulation. And to me, this makes the most sense. And I know to some people, they'll say that makes the least bit of sense to them because they won't want to wrestle with the implication of non-human entities having been here upon the earth with us in the ancient past, or even possibly still being among us in the modern day, in the current day, because they don't want to live in that world. They don't want to even concede the possibility that that could be possible. Yet, many, many, many ancient texts talk about this scenario in extensive detail. And yet, scientism and modern interpretations of these texts claim that these are just mythological stories told by crazy people in the ancient world, trying to entertain themselves. You know, I ask people, think of archivists of information. I consider myself an archivist of information. Now, in the modern day, think about how relatively easy that is to do, to preserve and archive data sets. We have digital access. We have access to technology and machines that make that archiving process easy. I offer an archive drive. It's called an ARC for short. Amazing repository of knowledge. 1 terabyte of information on every topic you could possibly imagine under the sun. Okay? To research and study. You don't even have to search the internet. It's all right there on one drive. Really important material. But you know, the ease at which that can even be done in the modern day. Think about our ancient ancestors, the difficulty that they had in preserving knowledge, the lengths that they had to go. And then sects of the dark priest class and the controllers that they were up against to try to take them out would murder them for attempting to spread this information in that time period. It was a direct risk to your life, to your physical life back then. We have it easy in comparison to spread this knowledge, to do the great work. In comparison to our ancestors who were attempting to do this work to enlighten their fellow brothers and sisters, we have it simple. So think about the level of difficulty they would have to go through to preserve this with nothing but ancient so-called technologies, non-technological civilization. You know, different forms of ancient writing. Pressing forms into tablets, into clay. Writing down things on papyrus with reeds. On huge scrolls. I mean, you know, it's cake now in comparison. We could throw it on digital devices that are mobile. Take it everywhere. You could have I have a library sitting right here in my hand. A tablet. 6,000 books on a tablet. Our ancestors would weep if they knew we had it that easy compared to what they had to do. So why would they have just told random stories? They were meticulously trying to preserve an account of history, as far as I'm concerned. And we'll be getting into those histories in later weeks on this show, starting next week. Let's go to your calls for the last few minutes. I know I didn't allow a lot of time. I apologize for that. Let's talk to Gonzalo in Toronto. Gonzalo, you're live on What on Earth is Happening. Are you with us?
Am I coming through clearly?
Yes, there you go. We don't have a lot of time.
Okay, I'd just like to say thanks for the show, first of all.
Sure.
And my question to you would be, in terms of psychopathy, when did you come across it? Because, funnily enough, I see even some musicians and other people integrating their encounters with psychopaths and pushing it off in their art.
Yeah, I've probably been studying it for the greater part of 20 years of my life now. So I've been aware of it for the larger part of 2 decades, and have studied it in different capacities, from a spiritual perspective, from scientific intellectual perspective in the sense of psychology and neuroscience, etc. And also looking at its origins, or attempting to delve into the explanation for its origins over probably the last decade of my life. So it's been a long journey and a long study for me, and most people haven't even begun a study of this. Most people are maybe not most, but many, many, many people are still in denial of its existence, let alone having started an actual rigorous study of it. And that needs to change. We need to make more people aware that this is something that we really need to become aware of and study in depth to understand these beings are all around us. You know, there's not as many of them as there are good people, most certainly. But they are out there, and they're in positions of power. Psychopaths weasel their way into positions of power in this world. We prop them up. We're the ones who prop them up. I hope that answers your question. Let's see if we could squeeze one more call in. Let's go to Tyler in Tennessee. You're live on What on Earth is Happening. Welcome.
Hey, sir, I don't know what your name is. This is the first time I've listened to you.
I'm Mark Passio. My website's whatonearthishappening.com. Doing a show here every Saturday night, 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. Eastern.
And Mark, I'm an RBN listener and everything like that. I usually listen during the day, but for some reason I'm listening to you tonight, and I was compelled to call. I just wanted to. I'm a Scorpio. My birthday's October 28th, and I just wanted to relay to you a dream that I had.
Tyler, I'll tell you what. You call into the next show. We're out of time, unfortunately. Call in next week. I'll put you right through. You could tell me about that dream. That's all the time we have for this episode, folks. We'll see you right here next week. Thanks for listening.